Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We are indoors today with the napping dogs who had a busy night. We did have a few coyotes around, so they're taking a nap. We have Vodka here and Tequila over here. And if you're wondering why there's fluff all over the floor, it's because they also decided to destroy a toy. Because that's what they do. And Whiskey, of course, is napping here. He's not a livestock guardian dog. So, today I thought I would quickly answer a question I've been getting since I talked about feeding livestock guardians. I mentioned I don't feed raw food and I'm not going to feed raw food. So I've had people ask me, why? Am I against raw food? No, I am not against raw food. Okay? There are a couple of reasons why I don't feed raw food, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should talk to your vet and come up with a diet that is most appropriate for the dogs you have. Why don't I feed raw food? Few reasons. The first reason is this dude right here. He is our oldest dog. He is an elderly gentleman now, and he was our dog before we started the hobby farm. Okay, we've started the hobby farm a few years ago. He was a few years before that. So, he's not a livestock guardian. He's a golden doodle. And Whiskey here can't eat raw food. He can't even have a raw egg without vomiting. He has kind of a delicate digestion. He doesn't process foods the way some dogs do. So he can't have anything raw. And I actually have to make him a pot of rice cooked in chicken broth in order for him to properly digest his food without getting sick. So he has to have a little bit of rice with every meal. It just helps settle his stomach, and that's been worked out with vets, and he's fine. But he can't eat any raw food. So even if you're going to give him an egg, you have to cook it. So that's primarily why I never even bothered, because he can't have it anyway. So the second reason actually comes down to cost. So one time, my vet and I, who were also friends, but we were talking about raw food, and he told me, he's like, I don't recommend a raw food diet. Is that a car? That was a car. Good boy. He's like, he's just checking. So my vet was saying, we were talking about it, and he's like, no, I actually don't recommend a raw food diet for dogs. And I asked him why. And he goes, 2 reasons. People are cheap and they're stupid. So let's talk about that first reason, the cost. Frankly, raw food is freaking expensive. And livestock guardians, Vodka's moving over here. Livestock guardians tend to be larger dogs. They are all larger dogs, actually. Livestock guardian breeds are big. They have to be. They're big and they eat a lot. So frankly, you take a 150-pound dog like Vodka and you start feeding him raw food, and it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So the cheap part comes into play. A lot of people who raise animals don't have a lot of money, because a lot of our money goes into coops and fencing and stuff like that. So a lot of us don't have a lot of extra cash, so raw food costs more. Pound for pound, for what your dog will consume, raw food costs more than kibble. That's just a fact. Whether you love feeding raw food or whether you'll never feed raw food, it is more expensive to feed raw food than it is to feed kibble. In fact, one of my sisters fed raw for a while, and then she just couldn't continue because, frankly, it was just too expensive. Okay, which I completely understand not being able to afford it. It's expensive, and not all of us have the extra cash. So that's another reason I don't feed raw. Could I feed raw for these two? Probably. But it would be quite expensive, and they're doing just fine on kibble. And we do cook for them. So, when we're barbecuing, we throw some stuff on the barbecue for the dogs, whether it's a pork chop or whether we cook some extra chicken or whatever we're making. We usually make extra for them. So they get other food. They don't just eat kibble. Okay, and Whiskey obviously gets his rice, with chicken, usually. Because Whiskey can't eat pork. Whiskey's a special case, okay? He can't eat pork. He also can't eat fish. Don't ask. It's just, he's weird. So we have to be careful with what we feed Whiskey. But the livestock guardians, I have not found any food sensitivities in either of them yet. And we've had them a while. So, yeah. So the cost is a big deal. And I never fault anybody for not being able to afford a specialty diet. And raw food is a specialty diet. The other reason I don't is because, love it or hate it, raw food carries bacteria. And that's why we cook our food as humans, because we can't eat raw chicken without getting very, very sick. Okay? So there are certain things that our bodies just can't process that a dog's can. So she could eat raw chicken. I obviously couldn't. And I'm also immunocompromised, and I have 2 immunocompromised children, and my mother is immunocompromised as well. So because of that, there is a risk when you're feeding raw. There is a risk that the bacteria that they eat that is fine for them could transfer to you, especially because she sleeps in my bed. Should she sleep in my bed? Probably not. Does she? Yeah. And she's gonna. That's just the way it is. She sleeps in my bed. Don't worry about it. She's my baby. So, frankly, I have vodka. So, frankly, I am severely immunocompromised. So, there are precautions I have to take around all of our animals. And that applies to chickens and the horse and things like that. I have to take certain precautions. That's why when I'm cleaning the chicken coop, I'm wearing a mask and things like that. I have immuno problems. So the danger there is if she eats a bunch of stuff that could transfer bacteria to me and then I get sick, I'm not likely to recover very well. So because of that, and because of this man, and because of the expense, I chose not to even explore it with our dogs. And it's also difficult to do right. Now, you can buy raw food diets that are properly formulated for dogs. But again, people are cheap and they don't want to do that because they're expensive. So then they kind of try and do it on their own. And doing a raw food diet for your dog and meeting all of their nutritional needs. Remember, they're not wolves, they're dogs. So they have different nutritional needs than a wolf. So meeting all their nutritional needs in a raw food diet without buying the expensive raw food diets can be a bit of a problem, right, baby? So ultimately, it's just not worth it for us. It is really expensive. There is the bacterial concern. And frankly, I don't have the time to do a raw food diet that is not pre-done. So you can do a raw food diet that is not pre-done, where you buy all of the things, but 1, it's expensive, and 2, it takes more time. Is it a little bit cheaper than the pre-formulated foods? Yes. So you can buy things that are already done. They'll cost you more than doing it yourself. That's true of pretty much everything. Doing it yourself is always cheaper. But I don't have the time to do that anyway. So you combine the expense with my lack of time because I'm very busy, and you also combine it with the bacterial concerns, with immunocompromised people in the house, and it's not worth it for us. It might be worth it for you. I'm not saying anything bad about raw food, which is some of the comments I got when I said I don't feed raw. I don't feed raw because it's not right for me. It might be right for you. Work with your vet to figure out what is good for your dog. Okay, because contrary to what some people like to say, vets are well educated in canine nutrition. So ask. Talk to your vet about what will work best, and then you may have to adapt it based on your own pocketbook, right? So not all of us can afford the $100 a bag kibble either. And most of us have to go with something a little bit cheaper. I know I do. I go with hi buddy. I go with middle of the road kibble because I'm not going to spend $100 for a bag. Not going to happen. I don't mind spending like 40, 50, 60. I'm not spending 100. Especially when I need 4 bags a month. So that's why I don't feed raw food. It has nothing to do with hating a raw food diet. I don't hate raw food diets for dogs. They can be done very well, and they can be very healthy for your dog. They just don't work for us in our situation. And they don't work for a lot of people, and that's fine. If they work for you, I'm glad. But my recommendation, as always, is to work with your vet on the appropriate nutrition for your dog. Okay, your livestock guardians do have slightly different needs than some other breeds because of the way they were bred. So do talk to your vet about what diet works best for your dog. And remember, your dogs are individuals. So just like he can't have anything raw because he'll get sick, and he has to have specially cooked rice with every meal so that he doesn't get sick, that's an individual need. That is not something every dog or every livestock guardian, he's not even a livestock guardian, but that's not something that every dog needs. So you have to meet your own dog's individual needs, and some dogs will do fantastic on a raw food diet and some dogs will not. So I don't feed raw, but I'm not saying you shouldn't. Okay, so hopefully that addresses why I don't feed raw and will stop the angry DMs I've been getting on Facebook. So hopefully stop it. Stop sending angry DMs because I'm not anti-raw food. Frankly, I don't much care what you feed your dog as long as it works for you and your dog. There you go. So enough with the angry messages. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow.